Imagine this. You've just had an incredible interview with a podcast guest on your show, and you feel like they are a perfect fit for your services. The conversation was incredible, the energy was flowing. But what happens after the recording ends? In this episode, we're going to be talking through some strategic ways to turn those guests into clients. This is going to be done in a very natural and organic and ethical way. We're not going to turn very salesy with it. It's just going to be a mutually beneficial discussion. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello and welcome to this episode. My name's Alicia, and I'm so excited that you're here for an episode of Podcasting Unlocked. One of my favorite ways to monetize podcasts is through turning guests into potential clients. And if you've been here for a while, you'll know that this podcast used to be called Listeners to Leads. But we changed it to Podcasting Unlocked because I wanted to focus on more than just turning your listeners into leads. I wanted to talk about the impact that we're making with our podcast. I wanted to talk about how to get some engagement from your listeners and be able to just feed the validation that you need as podcasters to continue doing the work that you're doing. I wanted to be able to discuss more than just the monetization side as well. But today we're going to be talking about monetization from the lens of turning your guests into potential clients. Now, I feel like this builds on the last episode that I did, which was all about creating strategic partnerships with your guests. And we didn't talk monetization there. This one is just taking it a step further. And the reason I want to do that is because when you have a guest on your podcast, it is very easy to categorize them into one of three things if you are picking a strategic guest. They could be a connection point for you, meaning they know someone who could maybe work with you. They could be a collaborator. I recently, just today actually, did a summit for someone who I was on their show. They were on my show, and it was a great way for us to collaborate further and get our messages out there together. Or they can be a client. So I've also had people who have been guests on my podcast book strategy sessions after they hear more about what I do, and they want to learn how to really grow their show as well. And so all of those three things are ways that we can kind of move our guests into one of those places. And so we don't always have to consider, all right, they're going to just be clients. They could also be connections or collaborators. But for the sake of today, we're going to be talking about turning those guests into clients. And I'm going to tell you, it starts at the very beginning of the process of your podcast. When you have that intake form, if that flow or that initial conversation, if you do a pre-chat, if there's a disjointedness or a misalignment with whether that's values, how you talk about things, then this can cause some serious strain in the relationship. So this connection of turning your guests into clients really does start with that initial interaction that you have with them. Is it positive or is it negative? Then we go into the actual conversation. When you are talking to them, you can approach this one of two ways. How I approach it, if you listen to this podcast, you'll know that when I have guests on my show, yes, it is about highlighting them and the services that they offer and the things that they do, and getting deeper conversations about their story. But I'm also using it as an opportunity for me to talk more about what it is that I do and how I support my clients. I also will add in little anecdotes about what I'm finding is working and what I'm finding is not. Because when I'm creating podcast content, it is imperative to me that I am keeping my podcast listener at the top of mind. And they might not always be fully interested in exactly what that guest has to offer or is talking about. But if I can bring it back to something that is relevant for them, then it's a win for all of us. Then their episode gets shared more. I get some credibility because I'm able to bring it back to my audience, and then we can boost those numbers. Then we go into after the conversation. Now, this is not after we have left the room. It is after we have stopped the recording, having an additional conversation. So you're going to want to make sure that you have enough space in the conversation or the recording time to be able to extend the conversation a little further. And what I like to do is say, is there anything I can do to support you? Is there any potential clients that you're looking for? Which I did mention in the previous episode where we talked about turning your guests into strategic partnerships. But asking that question lets them know, like, hey, I'm willing to help you grow your business because what you're doing is important and I believe in it. And it allows them with reciprocity to say, hey, is there anyone you're looking for? Maybe I know someone who can make a connection. And so that after the actual recording, the show after the show, as I like to call it, is actually really imperative for turning that guest into a client. Now, again, keeping in mind that not every guest will be a client. Some of the guests might be collaborators or connections as well. And it might be years where you're connecting and collaborating with them, and then they become a client. So be open to the possibility of what could happen with this. The other way that you could go about doing this is that you instead interview the person entirely. Don't worry about sharing your expertise. But in this case, if your idea is, look, I just want to focus on my guest and the relationship that I'm building with them, then you don't actually need to worry about the download numbers. You don't need to worry about that extra stuff. And it's about what are you doing to ensure that that person turns into a connection, a collaborator, or a client. And so after the call, you might say, like I said before, hey, how can I support you? But you also might say, hey, I noticed that during our discussion, you mentioned you were struggling with this. I know someone who can support you with that. Or, hey, would you like some feedback? This is an experience I had, and I'm happy to share it with you. And that just shows that you're willing to give information, you're willing to connect them with people, and it shows you as an expert in your industry for that person. So we've talked about the pre-interview, we've talked about during the discussion, and we've talked about after you've stopped the recording and that kind of show after the show, as I like to call it. But that is just part of it. An additional part that is extremely imperative, and I think gets missed in a lot of this conversation, is the follow up. So here's what I want you to do. A week after the episode goes live, I want you to follow up with a personalized note. Now, if your focus is turning your guests into clients, then you won't really need to worry about asking them, like I mentioned in the previous episode, hey, could you leave a rating and review? Don't forget to share this with friends. I loved connecting with you. Is there any way I can support you? Instead, you're going to send them a very personalized note that references a specific point of your conversation and gives a tangible resource or idea relating to the challenge that they specifically mentioned. And so that might mean that during the conversation, you're asking them, what is something that you're really struggling with right now? We actually had a client that did this. She would ask them at the end of the conversation, I like to make sure that we show that not all of us have this together, that we are all struggling with something. What is one thing that you're working on in your business or you're maybe struggling with? And from that, she was then able to create a summit entirely focusing on what the struggles were of her guests, the people who were her ideal clients. She was also able to create a really strategic follow up where she was saying, hey, I noticed you said you were struggling with this. Here is a way that I can support you in doing this. Or here's a free resource on how to get through this because I've been there. Or here is someone I know that I'd love to connect you with because they focus on the thing that you're struggling with. And so this just endears the person to you because you're giving them a free, tangible resource or a free idea or relatable thing that's going to help them with their challenge. It's going to build trust, which is so important if you're trying to turn these podcast guests into leads for your business. So this is why instead of just at the end of the conversation saying, hey, you should join my program, or hey, you should buy my course and do my things and book the session and become a client, instead of that hard sell, this is a more softer sell that you're just giving them small, relevant tasks for free or sending them a resource that is going to support them. It's going to be valuable and it's low pressure, right? They don't have to say yes. If they don't use it, they don't use it, and that's okay. Or if they do use it and they come back and say, wow, that was really helpful. I can't believe it. Like, thank you so much. You can say, awesome. I'm so glad I either made that connection for you, or I'm so glad that you were able to find support. If there's anything else that you would like support around, here's some other things that I offer or other things I do. I'm happy to support you in any way. That will open the door for the long game. This doesn't mean that you're going to convert them right away. A great way to continue nurturing that relationship is following them on social media, asking them if they would like a free resource, which allows them to be onto your email list as well. And remember that right now is not a good time is still a valid answer. And that doesn't mean that it might not be a good answer for them later, but right now is just not a good time. I actually recently said that to someone. It was an agency mastermind that I'd been eyeballing. And while I would definitely be considering joining, right now, I just do not have the capacity, and I want to make sure that I'm focusing on growing my business in really strategic ways and also doing the work within my business in really strategic ways. And so I told her, look, right now is just not a good time. Here are some things that are going on. If it opens up that I would be able to or have space or capacity to join something like this at a later date, I'll let you know. And her response was extremely gracious, which I love. It wasn't like, you need to do this or your business is going to be trash, which I've had those conversations too. They're not fun. But instead, she was like, oh, no problem. I totally understand. I get it. I've been there. And if anything changes, just let me know. The door is always open for you. So that is something that's really important, is just making it not a hard sell. We don't want to make our guests feel like we only invited them for the sole purpose of selling to them, because that is not the intention with this. The intention is to create connections, collaborations, and potentially clients. I also want to make sure that we talk about creating systems. You can use a simple CRM, a spreadsheet, some type of tracker where you can add some notes or potential opportunities for these guests as well. You can also create a follow-up template that is built into your stuff. And if you want to make it more personalized, then it might be worth having a solid template that you can then personalize just specific parts based on the conversation that you had with that person. It'll save you time and it'll ensure that you're consistently showing up regularly every time for those guests and trying to turn them into clients. If this is something that you want more support around, I want to recommend that you book a strategy session. You'll see the link in the show notes as well as the YouTube description. We can spend an hour going through your process, your guests you have now, maybe even looking forward and trying to determine what is going to be the best course of action for you to turn those guests into clients. Until next time, happy podcasting.